Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's segment of Hope for the Moment. I trust that you've had a chance to see the previous one, as this is part two to the last segment that we had on Tuesday. But where can I find truth? And this was some time ago. I believe it was when I was in college. But one of my buddies, I was on Facebook, and noticed that on it had said that his birthday was that day, and it just kind of came out of the blue for me, and I didn't realize that his birthday was that day. I was like, man, how did I miss this? So I quick get him up on the phone and wish him a happy birthday, and he begins to laugh, and he's like, dude, seriously? And so I started to realize something was wrong, and he had changed his birth date on Facebook as a joke and was catching people, not realizing when his actual birthday was. So I felt pretty sheepish after that, but sometimes it can just be hard to know, what to believe. And in the last segment, we started talking through how hard that can be to know where to go to find truth and all the things, especially with what we're seeing today and all the different opinions and views and everything that's going on there. But we looked into Nehemiah at the example that he had, what he was facing in chapter 4, and we looked at verses 7 through 12 and all these different sides, all these different angles that were coming against him and against the Jews then. And we kind of left it, in a pretty dire situation there. What was he going to do next? Where was he going to go next? So I want to jump right on into it. If any of you know me, I don't do well with cliffhangers. I don't do well with surprises or holding out for a long time. So we'll just jump right back into it. Verses 13 and 14 here. So he gets through this. He's got his enemies are saying one thing. He's got people in Judah are saying another thing. The Jews around him in the surrounding cities are saying one thing. And so then in verse 13 he says, "So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows." And then verse 14, "And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, 'Do not be afraid of them.' And then here's the key. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." But there he says, remember the Lord. And in the midst of everything that was going on, all these differing opinions and views and what could happen, he just reminds them. He said, do not be afraid. Remember the Lord. And I think the reason that he goes there now is because this is something that he had practiced. And if you go back to chapter 1 in Nehemiah, when the news first reaches him of what's happening to the Jews, he goes before the Lord in prayer. And as he's doing that, it's as though he's reminding himself of who God is, of what God has done, of what God has promised. And so he's kind of already practiced this aspect of remembering the Lord in the midst of everything that's going on here. So in the face of the opposition, the different truths, that the Jews were hearing at this time, they needed to be reminded of the truth. They needed to remember the Lord. Now, flash forward to today, I'm not going to tell you which news outlet to listen to or which person to follow on social media or which articles to read. We need to use proper discernment in all of those areas. So I'm not going to pick and choose for you, tell you what to do. I'm also not saying that there's nothing that we can trust, out there on the internet or whatever we're reading, that there's just, don't trust any of it. None of that's helpful. None of that's beneficial. That's not what I'm saying either. But I am saying that there is somewhere that we can always go for truth, for the truth, and that's God's Word. There's so many unknowns out there, so many opinions, so many differing views, all of these things that we're being bombarded with. So we need to make sure that we take some time to remember the Lord, and the only way that we can do that is by spending time in His Word. Because day in, day out, we're being hit with all of these different things, and we have to discern, okay, what do I believe, what do I not, and there's good things in that. We could go a lot of different avenues with that to see how to approach those. But we need to be spending time in God's Word. We need to remember the Lord because that is the ultimate truth. In John 17, Christ is praying for his disciples and for future believers, which is us. And as he works through this prayer in John 17, he gets to verses 17 through 19 that I want to focus on here. And so he says, verse 17, "Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sake I consecrate myself, that they also may be sanctified in truth." And so Christ asked of the Father that we be sanctified in the truth, which is God's word. This means that there's a dedication, a service, and a loyalty to God and to his word and the truth that we find in here. And I just love how simply he puts it in John 17:17. It makes me think back to when I was in college and we had orals and we had to study and prepare to be able to defend the truths that we find in God's word. And if there a verse like John 17:17 was a good one in regards to the truth of God's word. And so if a question ever came up for that, John 17:17. But I love how simple it is here. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. And so we look around at everything that's going on, all of these different things that are hitting us, but we can always go back to this. Your word is truth. So I may not be able to tell you, which articles are going to be helpful ones. I may not be able to tell you which ones are the most accurate, what sources are going to be the best to go to. But I can tell you that no matter what information we're being hit with, no matter what is going on in the world, you can always trust the truth of God's word. And that is an area that I'm willing to stand on. Because there's going to be some battles, out there, arguments that are going on, and you're going to have to decide, is this worth, me, sticking to my guns here? Sometimes it's not. But in regards to the truth, the absolute truth that we have in God's word, I will always stand on that. And there is importance, in procedure and thinking about the different things with the pandemic and how to go about things, all these different truths and opinions and views that we're being hit with. There is importance in some of those things, the procedure, the timing, when to reopen. We're thinking about that with the church, all these different areas. There is importance in some of that. But at the end of the day, there is nothing that I'm going to put my trust in more than the truth of God's word. And so that call that Nehemiah has in chapter 4, as he's telling the Jews, you're hearing all these things, but here's what's important, guys. Remember the Lord. Remember God's word. Spend time in his truth, and that is something that we can trust no matter what's going on outside of the different things that we're hearing. We can always trust the truth of God's word. So thank you for tuning into this. I appreciate you guys and walking through these times with me and the different hope for the moments that we've had. As of right now, my plan, we're actually going to transition things a little bit different into next week. So this is going to be the last hope for the moment, as far as from what I'm looking at as we're gearing up towards different things here in the next few weeks. So for you in the youth group, young adults, I'm going to have some more details for you later. But as far as hope for the moments goes, this is the last one. I hope that it has been encouraging, challenging for you. I hope that it has pushed you into God's word in a time where things are a little bit different, things are a little bit crazy. But don't forget the truth. Don't forget to remember the Lord in these times. So thank you again so much. Continue living in hope, guys.